Hello, everyone. I'll be spending a couple of minutes doing the intros and housekeeping. But yeah, I'll slowly go ahead and cover a few things. My name is Naz. I'm the lead product marketing manager here at HackerOne. And yeah, before we get going, I want to remind you that we're recording the session and we'll make the on-demand recording accessible to you after the webinar to our website, and we'll also upload it on our YouTube channel. Next item I want to cover is that we'd love to hear your questions. If you're tuned in through LinkedIn, we'll be screening the questions there. And if you're here on Zoom, please drop your questions or insights through the Q&A tab at the bottom, or you can also contact us through the chat box, and we'll try to address everything at the end of the webinar. So without any further delay, I'd like to kick things off for today's session. Why traditional pen testing is letting you down and how to fix it. So yeah, thanks Spencer for moving the slide. In today's session, we'll be diving into the challenges organizations face with traditional penetration testing approaches, and we're going to be exploring actionable and modern strategies to address that. Joining us today are Spencer. He's the Director of North America Sales Engineering, and he holds extensive technical and cybersecurity experience. And we also have Jarrett. He is the VP of Product for Assessments at HackerOne, and he has previously served as a CISO and security product leader in past roles. So I'm really excited for the interaction and the conversation between the two of them. We can move on to the next slide. So yeah, with that, I'll give an overview of what we're going to be covering today. First, we'll explore the limitations of traditional pen testing and try to address why it's falling short. Then the fun part, we'll debunk the common myths comparing traditional and modern pen testing approaches. And next up, we'll dive into a live walkthrough of HackerOne Pentest to show you how it works in action, and we'll finish up with a dedicated Q&A session. So yeah, I see the attendance rate is at a very good level. So yeah, Jarrett and Spencer, let's get started.
All right, sounds good. Welcome everyone. So the first thing we wanted to start talking with is some of the things that we hear from our customers in relation to traditional pen testing. So certainly, as Naz mentioned, I was a CISO in a former life, and I think we've gotten a view of what pen testing has been over the years, and pen testing has been around since the 1960s, right? And while it is adjusted to changes in technology, it functionally hasn't adjusted to change in form very much, right? It still is primarily a professional services driven kind of approach. And due to the nature of how professional services work, typically it takes a long time for us to get on a calendar to get scheduled, multiple weeks to multiple months in some cases, depending on the time of year and how busy your particular vendor is, to get scheduled into that testing happening. There can be limited amount of resources that can be placed onto the test itself. And so the test windows can be relatively large. And this kind of lends itself to a more scheduled or kind of compliance driven use case for a lot of the pen tests that we're seeing. In addition to that, what we tend to see is that during the testing window, when testing is actually occurring, it tends to be a bit of a black box, right? There's some testers that are out there doing something. They're generating findings. They're kind of documenting those things, but a lot of times that information is not shared back to us as the customer until the end of the test window itself, when you get your giant PDF of doom that has all of your findings in it. Of course, modern pen testing platforms are getting better in surfacing these things in processable formats so that you can do various other things, but it still is relatively common to get spreadsheets and these types of things for a lot of our findings, right? And kind of as a result of the kind of highly scheduled methodology and this kind of limited insight during the testing window, we kind of see this really being a tool mostly for compliance-driven teams, right? So certainly we have to do it to check the boxes for various different compliance and regulatory obligations. But what it means is it doesn't really fit well into the developer or IT workflows, where they're testing things continuously as changes is happening, that issues are coming back into those teams to be able to work on as soon as they're found so that they can be retested. And so as a result, we tend to kind of see this, all right, well, the compliance team runs its test. It has this big ball of findings that now have to be handed over to the engineering teams to be remediated, and then it has to come back through the other teams, and we're playing kind of telephone between the different organizations. Right. And then finally, one of the last ones that we see customers kind of struggling with is a desire to get new findings, right? We've all gotten a pen test report where all it has is a quick scan that tells you where you configured SSL incorrectly according to whatever the scanner said, and didn't really find a lot of necessarily value out of that particular scan or that particular effort. And so we see customers who desire to move between pen testing vendors so they get different staff applied to that problem. And so new eyes, new experience, new backgrounds that'll hopefully find things in the environment that other testers may have missed, especially ones that have been looking over the same environment for a while. Right. And so as a result, that means in the traditional pen testing world, that means you have to a lot of times change vendors. And so you're in this process of having to find and source a new pen testing provider every year, which can be a bit of a headache. So certainly there's lots of other things that the customers sometimes deal with in the actual execution of these tests. But at a high level, this is a lot of the stuff that we hear from them. So before we kind of move on, we wanted to kind of validate that with you all. And so we're going to throw up a quick poll here where you can go ahead and select, well, what are the things that kind of have caused challenges for you in getting your pen testing done in your particular environments, if anything. And with that, we will give you a minute here to answer the poll, and I'll hand off to Spencer here.
So because of the challenges that Jarrett mentioned, we really saw an opportunity to rethink pen testing, make it faster, more transparent, and ultimately more effective. And that's really where Pen Test as a Service, or PTaaS for short, comes in. PTaaS transforms pen testing from a once-a-year event into a more agile and continuous process that really fits better into modern security workflows. PTaaS has a variety of benefits over traditional pen testing, and these directly speak to the problems that Jarrett mentioned, and based on the poll, it looks like most folks in the audience have experienced. So the first one is rapid spin up. Instead of waiting weeks or even months to start your test, we can kick off a pen test in as few as 4 business days. So if you have quick testing needs that you need to meet, PTaaS is great for that. Second, instead of the PDF of doom, as Jarrett so eloquently deemed it, which I love, you get real-time vulnerability data with your pen test. But instead of waiting weeks for that final report and then getting all of these findings dumped on your team and your development teams at once, you're going to have real-time insight into the testing as it progresses, and you're going to be able to get started on remediation of those vulnerabilities while the test is still going. And a lot of our customers are actually able to even retest and close out those findings before the testing is even done. Third, we really tried to streamline the workflow for vulnerabilities that emerge from your pen test. Findings are available as they happen, and we integrate with over 30 modern software development tools like Jira, ServiceNow, and Slack. This means that pen testing really becomes part of your typical security operations versus a separate, disconnected process. And finally, we have a deep bench of talent. We have over 160 pen testers on our bench and counting. So you can work with a global network of vetted pen testers without having to rotate vendors and go through messy procurement processes each year. Most of our customers take the approach of keeping perhaps a lead or one of the testers from their previous test and rotating in the rest of the team. So in that way, you get a little bit of the best of both worlds. You get a fresh perspective from the new testers, and you get that familiarity from the lead who is familiar with the scope from the previous year's test. And so really, because of all these advantages, with PTaaS, we're starting to move away from pen testing as a slow, rigid engagement and really change it to be an on-demand security model that helps evolve with your needs. And because PTaaS is such a new concept, we often see a lot of misconceptions surrounding it. So in today's webinar, we're going to start off with presenting 5 common myths associated with PTaaS and clarifying the misunderstandings around them. After we do that, I'll go into a demo and show you all exactly what it looks like to run a pen test with HackerOne, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions throughout. So please go ahead and use the Q&A function in the webinar to post questions as you have them, and we'll make sure to cover those at the end. But with that, Jarrett, I will turn it back over to you.
All right, so let's go to myth number 1. So Many folks know PTaaS or Pentest as a service as coming out of the bug bounty world, and especially customers who are familiar with HackerOne. We're one of the leaders in the bug bounty space and been doing that for 12 years now. Kind of think of it as this community of testers, and these testers are going to go and bang on my environments, and that's how I'm going to get my findings. And so sometimes there's a concern that really doesn't meet what we meant as the definition of pentest, right? Bounty is a pay for delivery model. At the end of the day, hackers get paid when they find the vulnerabilities. In pentest, we want to test all of the things, right? It's a pay for effort model, and so we want to make sure that we try all the doors and all the windows, and not just try the ones that look the most promising, like you might do in a bounty world. And so, while we do still rely on our community to deliver testing, and you get all of the value of all of those testers, as Spencer alluded to, pentest has to be a little bit different from the way we think about bounty. Right. And so for every pen test type that we support, we'll pop up a list of them here in a little bit, but there's, about a dozen or more now. For each one of those types, we're developing a methodology. And that methodology is, what are the things that are going to be tested during that test? We develop that by working with pen testers in our community, pen testers who work for HackerOne, and of course, aligning it to all of the various different industry methodologies like OWASP Top 10 or NIST or various other frameworks that are kind of industry standard for what things should be tested. Now, that methodology gives you a list of all the things that will be tested in your environment. This is a free and open document. It's on our website. If you want a copy of it, reach out to the team. Happy to share it for you if you can't find it. And it shows you what we'll test for a web test or internal or external network test or whatever test type it is. And this goes a lot deeper than just a PDF we share with the pen testers. So as you can see in the screenshots, we actually build all of that capability, all of that methodology into the platform itself. So every tester that's assigned to the pen test has to go through that methodology and show that they're testing against each and every one of these things. And that's how you get that proof that you need for your internal stakeholders, for your customers, and for your auditors, that there is a standard methodology that maps to an industry best practice and that all of the items in that methodology were tested. Right. So yes, PTaaS does use a community testing model, but it is a much more formal process of testing than you would see in a traditional bounty model. Right. Both models have pluses and minuses. Right. And so they both apply. In fact, a lot of our customers use both penetration testing and bounty to find different types of vulnerabilities in their environment. But certainly the pen test model is going to match something that your auditor would expect. And so this idea that it's just a collection of bug reports. No, it still is very much a methodology driven kind of adventure and work from our pen testers. And all of that, of course, will be in your pen test reports so that your auditor can see it, so that your customers can see it and know that, yes, this was a test that was performed by expert testers that followed a industry standard methodology, just like you would expect any other pen test to do. All right. So with that, I think we can hop back to Spencer for myth number 2.
Yep. And after folks find out about the methodology-driven testing, the next question that often comes up is, well, if I get all these findings in real time, isn't that going to overwhelm my security or development teams with noise? And actually, I think it's exactly the opposite. PTaaS isn't just a fire hose of vulnerabilities. It's really curated, prioritized, and integrated into your existing workflows. Because we have direct integrations with a lot of modern SDLC tools like Jira and ServiceNow, your developers are going to be working in the tools that they're already familiar with. They don't have to learn another platform. They don't have to go outside of their standard workflow. They can instead focus solely on remediating the vulnerabilities that are found in your pen test. The vulnerabilities that are found in a HackerOne pen test will always have full reproduction steps and remediation advice as part of the vulnerability, which makes it very easy to understand exactly what needs to be done in order to fix it. And because with PTaaS, you're getting vulnerability findings as they emerge, I think it's actually more manageable than a traditional pen test where you may have a dozen or so vulnerabilities that are all dumped on you at once, and you may need to fix those in the next week or two. With PTaaS, because you're getting that real-time visibility into the findings as they're being discovered, it actually tends to space out the vulnerabilities and give your team more time to fix the same vulnerabilities that are found during the pen test. And we'll go into this and what it looks like a little bit more in our demo later on. But really, because we have the platform aspect where you get that real-time visibility, it actually makes it much easier to manage the findings and remediate them once the pen test concludes. And Jarrett, let's cover ahead and cover myth number 3.
All right. Yes. So we've talked a little bit about customers being scared or having questions about methodologies. And now we get kind of a different angle to the same question, which is, well, if we're testing with a community, then how do I trust this community? How do I know that the people in it are the right people and they have the right expertise and are vetted and all the things that I would expect from a traditional kind of pen testing, professional services view? And so the kind of ugly truth in a lot of ways of the penetration testing model or the professional services model is that in a lot of cases, traditional pen test is where junior staff are used most frequently, right? And so most of the time when you're going to a traditional pen test company, if you're just doing a pen test, you're not necessarily getting a very senior or experienced person to kind of come and do that work. Because our model is different and we use a community model, we don't have that restriction. So as Spencer mentioned, we have over 100 pen testers today. But from a community perspective, there's 200 or about 2 million people in the HackerOne community in total. At any one month, you may have 100,000 plus that are active in that particular month, and thousands of those testers have applied to our penetration testing program. We only accept 160. We could have 5,000 in there pretty quickly if we wanted to, but we want to keep that group small. It needs to be big enough so that we can start tests quickly and finish them quickly, as we talked about earlier. But we also want it small enough that we can really be selective about the people that we are including in this group. So as you can see from our graph here, over 70% of the folks in the pen testing business are in the pen testing area in HackerOne are going to have 5+ years of security experience, right? We spread that experience over a lot of the different pen testing types that we support, whether that's Web 2, Web 3, network, mobile, source code assessments, various other components that we do, or various other pen test types that we support. In addition to that, that means that we can make sure that those 160 pen testers are pretty continuously booked. That's good for our testers, of course, but it also means that we're getting constant feedback from our customers, from our support staff, and from the testers themselves on how that performance is going, right? And so if there are issues in the community, we can address those early on, and testers can be removed from the program if they need to be. That does not happen very frequently, if at all, but certainly a value. So, coming to a PTaaS model or a community model, you get kind of the best of both worlds. You get to have access to this much more in-depth community with higher level of experience, but you also get to be able to still drive those tests very quickly and get the test results back when you need to. So you can get kind of better results at a faster clip without having to worry too much. And that allows us to do a lot of what Spencer was talking about, where we can integrate that PTaaS experience into the tools and processes that your development and engineering teams use. So it doesn't have to be this completely separate, siloed experience that we have today. Right. So as we bring testers into the pen test crew, of course, they are going to be the most highly vetted of the community that we have. So we have to have a lot of trust that they're going to do a good job. But as they move into the pen test community, of course, they'll be background checked. We do ID verification for them. We continually assess their performance, all those things. We know a lot more about the pen testers who are in our program than we would know about the pen testers or the testers who might be in the overall bounty community. Right. And so that gives us a lot of visibility, a lot of understanding, a lot of control over how customers experience the pen test offer. So, and with that, I think we can move to myth number 4 we're at now.
Yep, and this myth actually pertains to our community as well. So on the trust side, there's, Jarrett's covered that piece, but I think there's something to be said about the skilled side. And there is a misconception around PTaaS that it's better suited towards very simple scopes, just your basic web application or perhaps external network testing. And I think in the early days of PTaaS, that was definitely true. But because of the diversity and breadth of our community, we've really been able to expand our PTaaS offering to handle a lot of assessment types that you might typically associate with more of a traditional consultancy model. So like Jarrett mentioned, our broader HackerOne community is over 2 million strong, and we have about 160 plus pen testers in our community. So because of that breadth of community, we can offer specialized assessment types like you're looking at on the screen. We can do code reviews. We can do Azure and AWS configuration reviews. We can test executables in desktop applications. We perform AI red teaming to test for AI safety and AI security implementations. So there's a lot of specialized testing that typically fell to traditional consultancies that is actually very well suited for the PTaaS model. Um, Again, the benefit of going with PTaaS means that you are not locked in to a single consultancy's skill set. You can test a broad range of assets, rotate tester talent every single year, and still be with the same vendor with HackerOne. So again, you're avoiding messy and long procurement cycles, but you're still getting that diverse perspective that really leads to better results than traditional pen test. And because we have that large pool of experts, we really can evolve with your security testing needs over time. So AI was kind of the hot topic of 2024, will probably be the hot topic of 2025 and beyond. And that's something we were able to respond to very quickly because the pen testers in our community are always on the bleeding edge of technology. We're able to respond to customer demand very quickly, roll out new test types that help meet the testing needs of our customers, and they have all of the same benefits of the PTaaS model in that rapid spin up, the real-time findings, and those streamlined workflows. And the last piece of PTaaS that we haven't really talked about yet, you have our community, we have the platform, but we also have another group internal to HackerOne that helps facilitate the efficiency of PTaaS, and that's our technical engagement managers. And Jarrett, maybe you can help cover the last myth before we go into the platform demo.
Yes, last but not least, myth number 5. So, one of the things that sometimes customers are concerned about when they hear about a community model is they may have this perception that, well, we're going to connect you with the hackers, and then I don't know, like your problem now, and you and the hackers work together and you do all that work. And that's generally not at all the way the process works. So, penetration testing is still a goal where we're going to run a project and we're taking you from beginning to end, right? And many of our customers need that help, especially if this is maybe their first time going through, or some of our larger customers who are testing hundreds of applications a year want a partner on their side to help orchestrate all of the program work that they have to do to make sure that the overall pen testing program happens. And all of that happens from our technical engagement managers or TEM teams. So these are HackerOne badges. They work for us. And their job is to oversee and make sure that all of the pen testing work is done correctly, right? That you're getting what you want, that the program is run correctly, that the testers are able to deliver what they need to when they need to do it, that the findings are correct and filled out and have enough information to be able to be actionable. The team generally has an enormous amount of experience in IT and security. Many of them are former pen testers themselves, and they kind of help you walk through the process of scoping the engagements, managing any of the testers, getting them assigned to your program, making sure that you have the right testers for the platforms that you need tested, answering any questions that you may have, dealing with things that come up. So in that Slack channel where we're going to connect you directly with your pen testing group, you also have your TEM in there from HackerOne to make sure that anything that comes up that needs to be managed is managed. And the final team that, of course, will create the final reports and make sure that those are delivered appropriately, answer any questions that you may have, and just make sure that the process gets to conclusion in a successful way where everybody's kind of happy at the end of the day. So, we're not, the goal of our process is not to introduce you to hackers. The goal of the process is to make sure that the penetration testing is done appropriately and will be accepted by you, your stakeholders, and your regulatory agencies. All right. So with that being said, that is all of our myths. And so we will transition over to a bit of a demo here. And Spencer can walk you through the platform and give you a view of how this looks like in real life.
Awesome. So we're going to really focus this demo on the key benefits of PTaaS that we spoke to earlier. And as a reminder, those were rapid spin up, real-time insights, streamlined workflows, and deep experience and easy tester rotation. So I'm going to go ahead and pivot over to my demo environment here. Everything in here is fake data, so don't worry, we're not looking at any real vulnerability data for HackerOne. But we're going to go ahead and start off on our Pentest overview dashboard. And the Pentest overview dashboard is the single place in HackerOne where you can view and manage all of your pen tests that are running or completed or in setup. First thing to cover is that up top, our Pentest as a service offering is a subscription-based model. So very similar to a traditional consultancy, you can buy a bulk bucket of hours at the beginning of the year and consume those throughout the year. The advantage of this is that it allows you to spin up tests very quickly, and you don't have to worry about SOWs, going through procurement, and all of that when you just need something tested very quickly. So what enables the rapid spin up? Well, we have integrated scoping workflows that are built into the platform. And we can see that here. If I click the new pen test button, then that will bring up the modal for scoping. So we can either start a new pen test from scratch, or if this is an ongoing test, say for compliance each year, I can just quickly clone a previous scoping form and get started. When I hit next, the platform will generate a scoping form, and I will be ready to start inputting information about the goals of the test, about the asset details, and then I can submit this. So contrast this where you may need to get on a call or send various emails back and forth. Being able to enter all of the information about the pen test scope is typically going to be much quicker and more straightforward versus having to get on the phone live with somebody. So because of this integrated scoping workflow, we can very quickly spin up a test, often in as few as 4 business days. So next up, let's cover a little bit about what the pen test looks like once it's underway. So we've scoped the pen test, and now we've kicked it off. What does it actually look like as it's running? I'm going to go ahead and pivot over to our pen test details dashboard. And here you're looking at the details of a specific pen test in action. So I am testing my Android application for my annual PCI pen test, and we're looking at the pen test details dashboard. This gives real-time visibility into the progress of your pen test. So there's no more black box for this. I'm going to go ahead and refresh this real quick, but there's a couple things to call out on the screen. So as we're looking at the pen test, there are a couple things to call out. First off, Jarrett mentioned earlier, we have Slack workspaces for direct communication with your technical engagement manager, as well as the testers that are performing the test. So the advantage of this is that you're going to have real-time modern communications with the team who's responsible for helping run your test. So you can ask and answer questions very quickly. You're going to get 4 real-time updates throughout the course of your pen test in addition to this dashboard. And you're going to have a much easier time managing the test as a result of this. The other thing to note here is that you have nice high-level analytics on the progress of your pen test. So you can see high-level statistics like the severity of reports, the status of the reports, what the findings look like over time. And then next, we're going to go ahead and drill down into one of the findings that we found to show you what that looks like in the platform. But before we do that, the last piece here is the pen test team. So a couple of our myths talked about the community that performs these pen tests, which is over 160 strong. And you're going to see the team of testers right here in the overview. And each of these testers maintains detailed profiles on HackerOne. Those details are going to be provided in your final PDF report as well. And speaking of the PDF report, with PTaaS, you still get that final report. So we actually provide 3 reports by default. You'll have your pre-remediation full report, you'll have your post-remediation full report, and then you'll have a letter of attestation, often used for sharing with customers or with your auditors. Basically eliminates all of the technical details, just states that a pen test was performed by HackerOne on these dates. So in addition to all of the platform components that we're talking about today, you do still get the traditional PDF that you would expect with any pen test. So next, we're going to go ahead and navigate over to the HackerOne inbox. And the HackerOne inbox is where you manage all of the vulnerability findings that are found in your pen test. So we're going to go ahead and navigate over to a finding, a HTTP request smuggling finding, to give you an idea of what that looks like. So we're looking at a distinct vulnerability that has been found in the pen test. And you can see that we have full reproduction steps here. We have remediation guidance, and most importantly, we have the business impact of that vulnerability. So you're going to get very detailed reporting both in the HackerOne inbox and in the final PDF report that you receive after the engagement. So What I've done with this report prior to the demo is I've actually used our bidirectional integration with Jira to send this over to my demo Jira instance. So I'll go ahead and navigate to that here. So now we're looking at my Jira instance, and you can see this vulnerability and all of the associated details have been sent directly over. And this means that my developer or the individual responsible for fixing this gets to stay in the tools that they're familiar with, use their same workflow, and doesn't have to break that in order to remediate this vulnerability. Now, because this integration is bidirectional, any updates to the status or comments in Jira will get synced back to HackerOne and vice versa. So even though we have this integration, we're not losing real-time communications with our internal team members either. And once this vulnerability is fixed, that will get sent for retesting back in our HackerOne platform. And with retesting, we'll go ahead and go down below, and we'll be able to close out the report. We'll say that this was resolved. And then I can send it over for retesting to the same tester that found it. And so all of the retesting is done by the actual tester that found it. We're not using automated tools to perform that retesting. Now, the last component to cover with this is this button called Hi. And Hi is short for HackerOne AI, and that's our vulnerability copilot that's built into the HackerOne platform. So Hi has a number of benefits. It really empowers your team to act faster and smarter by transforming complex data into really clear, actionable insights. And so a really cool use case that a lot of our customers take advantage of is that Hi is really good at creating nuclei templates. So Nuclei is an open source vulnerability scanner. And the use case here is that we can take advantage of Hi to create a nuclei template based on this vulnerability and monitor for variants or regressions that may come up after this pen test. So now we're taking the findings from our pen test, we're turning it into an automated finding, and then continuously scanning our environment for that going forward. So now we're really transforming that pen test from a single point in time event to something that actually helps improve our security on an ongoing basis over time. So this is a huge time saver for our customers and also helps them reduce risk. Because again, if you introduce a regression in a later build, or there's variance in other assets that weren't part of the pen test, this nuclei template is going to help find that. So this is just one of the many use cases that Hi enables. It helps improve communication between developers. It can help you quickly summarize very complex and technical vulnerability reports. It even looks at videos and images in reports to help you quickly distill what's going on. So there's a ton of value from Hi, and this is included as part of the HackerOne platform and as part of HackerOne Pentest. So that was a very quick demo of our PTaaS platform, but hopefully this gives you an idea of how we really help enable that rapid spin up, those real-time vulnerability insights, the streamlined workflows, and the deep experience in tester rotation. And to wrap up, Jarrett's going to talk a little bit about the impact that HackerOne Pentest has, and then we'll be happy to field questions from the audience.
All right. Yes, excellent. We are seeing a bunch of questions come in, so thank you for those. We'll get to those just here in a minute or two, but if you have any others, please throw them into the Q&A section here. So look, the important bit about pen testing for us and to PTaaS is to move to a model where it can provide more security value in addition to the historic compliance value that it's always provided, right? So we've all gotten plenty of reports that were uninteresting from a security perspective that just had a bunch of findings that fine, we can go and fix those, but weren't functionally risk to the environment. These were things that were done really to satisfy a particular auditor, right? So we really want to make sure that you can see here we're finding 12 vulnerabilities reported on average per pen test, but more importantly, 16% of those vulnerabilities are higher critical severity ratings. Is we want to try to find the things that adversaries are going to use to breach our environments, not just check a box for compliance. That's great. We're going to have to do that. Compliance, of course, has a place, but also being able to add to the ability to find those things and those risks in your environment. That's also why a lot of our customers use our PTaaS offer, also use our Bounty offer, because Bounty is very good at finding those critical and high security vulnerabilities in a continuous fashion as well, right? We also, as we talked about, have pen testers where we're able to apply a lot of experience from our pen testing crew to all of our engagements. So customers tend to get pen testers with a lot of experience in the particular domain that they're testing, which kind of lets us get those critical and high vulnerabilities. That's where they come from, right? And then the fact that we have a big community is what gets us to that speed, both speed to test, but also speed to complete a test, right? If you have a large test that may be 200 or more hours worth of testing, we typically apply a lot of pen testers to that problem. There might be 5 or 6 pen testers or even more working on that particular engagement so that the calendar time stays low in being able to deliver those results in a timely manner. That can be much more valuable to your engineering organizations where they're getting feedback much closer to when they do deployments, and so they're things that you can test then. So you can also see all of the different accreditations that we have on the side. These are HackerOne accreditations just to make sure that everything that comes from us will be accepted by your team and your sourcing team and your auditing team and your security team and all that stuff. So with all of that, let's move to some questions. There have been some interesting ones. I think the first two I saw kind of come together. The first was how do we think about AI shaping pen testing in the upcoming years? As well as how much of testing is done by automated tools versus manual testing, both today and in the future, right? I think so. When we think about pen testing today, pen testing is done by our testing community, right? So it is done by humans. Now, those humans use lots of tools, and each pen tester has their own unique set of tools. Of course, you see a lot of things like Burp Suite and various other tools that are very common in that particular environment, but the testing is performed by human experts with years of experience in this domain. These are not automated pen tests. Right now, as we look to the future, there are certainly a lot of interesting companies that are coming up building things like AI hackbots and various other components that can do some of the things that we do in traditional pen testing today, right? In fact, some of those hackbots are actually already operating in our bounty community, making bounties for finding vulnerabilities in customer environments, right? So we're already seeing what these platforms are capable of doing. Right. So how is that going to impact pen testing? Well, pen testing has always been human expertise uh, applied to a problem using tools. Pen testers have always used tools. So if the tools get a lot more sophisticated, which is likely what we're going to see kind of this year and next year as the kind of LLM world really starts to kind of get down to brass tacks and capabilities for those particular outcomes, right? Then what we'll see is pen testing will still be pen testing. We're still going to have a concept of pen testing. It's just now our expectations for what that pen test might include will be more dramatic. Right. So one of the things that you're seeing now is a focus on threat-led pen testing, right? Of not just testing a web app, and we test it like any other web app that we test, but understanding more about this particular app, this particular company, this particular technology stack, and what things will we look at based on that, right? Like what methodology would we follow for this particular piece, right? And so if we're able to use AI to eliminate some of the block and tackle work that our testers have to do today, that frees them up to spend their brain power working on the more complex vulnerabilities, which is what we want to find in the first place. So we're already experimenting with it internally, both on our teams using it as well as giving tools for our pen testers to use. You see this a lot in our code security offer where we're reviewing internal code bases for customers. And so a lot of value there, lots of change that's going to kind of come through. I personally don't believe that the idea of a pen test of a human backed up by tools is going to change very much. I just think that our expectation of what that human should be capable of doing in a certain amount of time might change. So Spencer, I don't know, is there anything that you wanted to add to that one?
No, I think you covered the testing aspect really well. I guess the only thing I might add is I think there's also the piece of generative AI that helps improve all the other things associated, right? Performing the test is one thing, and certainly I think what you called out on the tools improving, ultimately making the pen test more impactful is absolutely true. But the other piece of it is I think we're already seeing efficiencies in the reporting piece, right? Generative AI is amazing for pen test reporting, for making reports detailed yet concise and easy to understand. I think there's a lot of value in the associated activities of pen test, specifically reporting, that AI really helps with, and we're already seeing those benefits today. So that's the only other thing I would mention is, it's not just the testing piece of it, but the other pieces of pen test that can benefit from generative AI as well.
Yeah. Great point. 100% agree. All right. So next up, do you see these kinds of reservations are myths coming from customers in specific geographical regions, sizes, SMB versus enterprise, verticals? Certainly, you do see some of these myths show up in certain areas, right? Organizations that are maybe a bit more conservative may have more questions about the community and whether or not that's something that they're allowed to do. Certainly, there are certain domains that will not accept that at all. Right. There are certain types of tests that are much more difficult to perform in a community kind of oriented model. So someone showing up on your physical and testing your physical security is still generally not going to be a community driven approach in the short term. Certainly SMB versus enterprise, I think we see a lot of difference between customers who perform one test a year in service of their compliance obligation, is very different from a lot of our much larger customers, our enterprise customers who may be testing hundreds of workloads every year, not only for compliance, but also because they have contractual obligations with individual customers. And it's just a more sophisticated, larger program. And so they both value different things, right? SMB sometimes will value the ability to, start things fast because maybe they weren't 100% paying attention to the calendar for when their test needed to be done. And enterprise value speed for different reasons. They just have a lot of tests to run, right? And being able to shorten the test windows can be really valuable for enterprise, where it requires the rest of the teams to interface with them at a different time or less painful time. They don't have to leave staging environments open for 6 weeks for testing. They could do it for 2 weeks, for example. So certainly, I think we do see differences in those areas. But everybody, we try to boil these myths down to things that we see that are fairly common as customers are thinking about PTaaS in general. So, Spencer, anything to add there?
Nope, nothing bad. I think you covered it well.
All right. Next question is a short one here around PCI. So there was a question around whether we support SSF. We don't do SSF directly. We support many different types of PCI testing. We're not a approved scanning vendor either in ASV. So we do PCI testing for internal and external network testing, as well as web, desktop, as Spencer mentioned, and the segmentation of PCI. So fairly common to meet all of the PCI requirements for your standard PCI pen test. For things like devices or that type of stuff, is we definitely test devices. I don't know that we've done a PCI device test as of now, and we are not listed as PCI SSF today. But certainly something that we're interested in talking more about. If you have a use case for us, feel free to reach out. What we've typically found, as Spencer talked about in the myths, is most customers have a lot of workloads. A lot of our enterprise customers, anyway, have a lot of workloads that they're testing, and many of them are common, right? They're network workloads, they're web workloads, and sometimes there's a long tail of strange things that are kind of unique to your particular business, right? It might be a particular piece of hardware or something else that you want to have tested, and so we do spend a lot of time with customers figuring out how to help them, meet those additional ones so that they can have the benefit of really having a single vendor for that. So, all right, next up. Spencer, this may be a good one for you because it's a little bit kind of more up your alley, but can the scopes of my bug bounty program, the parts that make sense, at least like targets and credentials, be shared or reused in a pen testing program?
Yes, absolutely. So a lot of our customers actually do this today because, we talked a little bit about the difference in the first myth between bug bounty and pen test, but because of those two different models, they actually complement each other quite well. You get more of that proof of coverage and the breadth from pen test, where bug bounty, being that pay for results model, helps you go very deep in certain areas. So a good example of this would be Adobe. So Adobe is one of our longtime, very mature bug bounty customers. They run an amazing public bug bounty program. So you can go on HackerOne.com and check out the details of it. They started using HackerOne Pentest to complement their bug bounty program because they have various contractual obligations and compliance obligations that they need to meet with Pentest. And they were actually able to uncover a vulnerability that was a few years old in one of their flagship products using HackerOne Pentest. So I think that goes to show that there's an advantage of these two different testing types when used in combination with each other. And so it is very common for customers to have similar scopes in both a pen test and the bug bounty program.
All right, thank you. All right, next up, can we get some information on pricing, right? The famous question. Look, it's not that we want to be cagey about it. It's that the way that this process works is we typically sit down with a customer and we scope out what tests do you want to perform over what environments and how big are those environments, how many different components that they have, whether that's IP addresses or user roles or whatever, depending on the type of testing that has to be performed, right? And that will get you down to a price. PTaaS is generally, you can think of it as a consumption model where you can buy 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 hours worth of testing availability and then apply it to different workloads how you want. And many of our enterprise customers do just that. So we help them scope out what we think they'll need for 100 apps that they want to test. And then they draw down on that over the years they're performing testing, all the way down to some of our commercial customers or SMB customers. They just have one workload they want to test. They want to test every year, right? And so they can, pricing for a test can range anywhere from a small thousands all the way up to hundreds of thousands or millions, depending on what it is that they're trying to do. So happy to talk more in depth. It's not that we're being cagey about it. It's just that it is still a relatively custom kind of thing, depending on what it is that you're trying to test. All right. Next up, what is the actual typical years of pen testing your experience your team has? And does the lead tester do the testing or manage the engagement and junior team members do the actual testing? So every test is assigned a lead tester, right? As we kind of mentioned in the question here. And then we will assign one or more individual testers underneath them to help do the test. All of the testers who are assigned to your test are from our testing program. We don't assign people from outside the pen test program to do any testing at all. So they all have that, 70+% of people having more than 5 years of experience. It is pretty common. So the kind of angles that will change who's assigned to the test will be when your test needs to be performed, right? So all these testers are busy testing as we kind of go through. So who's available, right? What skill sets you may need, right? If we're doing a desktop application, that's generally going to be a bit different from a network penetration test. So the skill sets will dictate who it is, right? And the lead tester is fundamentally responsible for the entire test. They orchestrate all of the testing. They review all the findings. They also do some testing themselves, depending on what's called for in the engagement itself. So the answer is, I guess, D, all of the above. But I wouldn't assume that the testers under the lead tester are junior. In fact, many of our testers are qualified to both be leads, but also do testing, right? So if what we need for that particular test is another tester, and that person is qualified as a lead tester, or they can do lead testing, sometimes they'll just be a tester on that particular engagement because that's what we need for that particular engagement at that particular time. And so that's fairly common across all of our kind of programs that we install, right? Let's see.
The only thing I would add there too,
yeah.
Jarrett, is I think, you touched on this in our third myth, but 75% of our community has greater than 5 years experience. 25% of the community or so has greater than 10 years experience. So we don't really have many junior testers necessarily. And certainly, even if they may not have as much professional pen testing experience, we're pulling them from that greater community of bug bounty researchers. So they have tons of application security experience as well. So in addition to everything that Jarrett mentioned, which is absolutely true, I think it's also important to remember that our community tends to be much more skilled and experienced than what you might find at a traditional firm.
Yep. Yeah. Most of the junior pen testers are cutting their teeth in bounty, right? That's where they get that experience. That's where we get experience with them. They have to have a good relationship with us through bounty before they would even be considered for the pen testing program. All right. Another
Definitely.
question on community. What percentage of your team were black hat exploiters versus only white hat practitioners? So certainly in the bounty community, there are lots of people who are what we would probably call gray hat, not necessarily all black hat, but certainly people who maybe have done some things that we may not be super proud of. But at the end of the day, most of the time now, they're also doing this work functionally to help customers reduce risk in their environment. So they are participating in the environment, participating in the community and the platform. They're reporting these vulnerabilities responsibly, and those vulnerabilities are getting closed, right? So there's definitely some gray hat components there as well. When you get into pen testing, you're going to find people who more are on the white hat practitioner side of the house, because typically most of these people are doing this for a living. That's not 100% true, but I would say that's probably true in general. Spencer, anything to add there?
Yeah, I think it goes back again to the vetting, right? We perform the maximum background check allowed by law based on the pen tester's country of residence. We perform ID verification on those pen testers, so we know they are who they say they are. We verify residency and citizenship. So I guess the question is kind of interesting because, yeah, basically we don't employ any criminals is the short answer to that. Like, all of our pen testers have the same level of vetting that you would expect with any firm. because of that background check, because of that ID verification.
Yep.
So I think one thing I saw we have a lot of Zoom questions, but we're actually broadcasting on LinkedIn too. And there were a couple questions from there. So maybe we'll pivot over there for a second and answer some of those. We got one from LinkedIn that asked, will the report or service provide guidance on what critical findings to prioritize to achieve the best or quick improvements in security or reducing the greater risk? And yes, absolutely. That's something that would be provided by your technical engagement manager and as part of the final report. So in addition to the severity of the vulnerability and the remediation guidance, you'll also zoom out a bit at the end of the test, and we'll give that guidance on, hey, here's going to be the most impactful changes that you can make to improve security and reduce risk. And then slightly related to that, we got a question on which frameworks we use to define criticality. And we do align with CVSS version 3.1, so industry standard vulnerability severity scoring system. So probably pretty similar to what a lot of organizations today use. That's actually another interesting use case for HI, the HackerOne AI Copilot that I demoed. That brings to mind Zoom, for example, has their own scoring system called VIS, Vulnerability Impact Scoring System, VISS. We actually created what we call a custom HI play, where we gave HI instructions on how to calculate the VIS score for Zoom on their reports. So again, a really good example of us being able to align with customer workflows in a way that more traditional solutions can't. Zoom uses this HI play to calculate the VIS score. It's about a 13-step calculation, so it's fairly involved. They're able to do it with a click of a button. So even though they utilize HackerOne for their findings, they can quickly translate that into their internal scoring system for further prioritization and remediation efforts. But for Pentest, going back to the question, we do align with the industry standard CVSS.
Right. All right. Let's see. So we've got a couple more questions here in a few more minutes, so we'll see if we can get through them. So someone had asked about a particular vendor, Attack IQ, providing automated testing. Any thoughts on that? I think there's a lot of folks who are kind of figuring out what this world is going to look like. There's no doubt that the LLM models and various other kind of investments in kind of machine learning and AI will increase the ability to find certain vulnerabilities that are found by our human pen testers today. Right. I think that's a fairly safe thing to say. We don't know what the scope of that will be or how much it'll be able to do or not. I mean, all that's still kind of up for debate. As I mentioned earlier, I don't think that changes much about pen testing as a function. I think that function will still exist as a human using tools to find vulnerabilities. But as I said before, I think the expectation of what we can get from the application of humans with these more advanced tools will be a lot higher. We'll just expect to find better results faster. But I don't think we'll get to a point where we would say, oh, okay, we don't need humans anymore. We've got an LLM scanner that's just good enough and we're done, no more humans. Right. I think there was an argument that would have been vulnerability scanning 10 years ago. Right. And we never really got there with that technology. But every single pen test includes a vulnerability scan now, right? And I think we'll see something fairly similar as we get into some of these other components. But it is great to see all of the investments that are going on in this space, and we're spending a bunch of time with these folks. Kind of as I mentioned, some of these tools are actually in our bounty community today, and so we're able to see what kind of vulnerabilities they're finding and how they're finding them, and what are the pluses and minuses that are coming out of those particular views. So a lot of really interesting stuff coming out of that space. We're really looking forward to, I think, a lot of change, like everyone else, that's going to happen this year in this domain. And we're really excited to see what kind of comes out of that. So, all right. Let's see. There was another question around AI here, just because we were just talking about it. Do you have methods to test check QA and accuracy besides step to reproduce testing for hallucinations? So a couple of questions maybe in here. So the first one around testing findings that come from the community, that is part of our TEM team's kind of writ of what it is that they're there for, right? They're there to orchestrate their test. They're there to make sure that that test completes successfully. And part of that is making sure that the findings that are coming back for you are validated in the right way, that are readable, that have all the steps to reproduce and all the various other things that you may need to talk about things like severity, as Spencer was talking about, and making sure that we can understand how these things impact. So all of the findings do go through a test and QA process today. Right. The hallucinations comment was a little bit more probably around high. And certainly internally, we do a lot of testing around hallucinations. As you saw with the demo, high is an add-on that adds onto these components. And so you will see when you're using high. And certainly hallucinations is a thing that the engineering team spends a lot of time thinking about when we build that. Spencer, you have a lot more experience with high, I think, than I do. Anything that you would want to add there?
Yeah, I guess two separate use cases. The testing, right, is not necessarily being done by LLMs. So humans are the ones that are checking for hallucinations or making sure it's valid. Actually, that's part of the lead's role in the pen test is any vulnerabilities that are found are double checked by the lead to make sure that they are indeed valid, and they check all the metadata like the severity scoring and all of that to make sure that it's accurate. But on the high side, that's really, again, human in the loop, right? Whether it's the technical engagement manager or the customer using it, we're helping QA that output and make sure that it's actually valid. So I guess, yeah, I don't want to conflate the two use cases of, high for like the reporting or the scoring system that I use with the actual testing. But I think everything that you said is accurate.
All right. So I think we're running low on time here, but there are still a couple more questions. If we don't get to yours, it's not because we didn't like it. We just had a lot more questions that I think we anticipated kind of coming in. So feel free to reach out to the team. We're always happy to hop on and talk about it. There's a question here specifically around, can you do pen testing for military NATO standards or suppliers using ISO 9001 with AQAP? Spencer, that might be the best one for you to answer here, just because you deal with these a little bit more. I mean, I think we may need to talk about the details with this particular customer to figure out if we can help there. But
Yep. Candidly, I'm not familiar with what those standards call for. So it's a firm maybe, but I invite you to reach out. We'd be happy to discuss more of the specifics and the requirements for the test to see if we can help meet some or all of the standards required, or some of the testing standards required under that specific compliance obligation.
we certainly have done testing for the federal government, for state governments, and various other countries and that type of thing. So there are areas where we can help there. There are also areas where we can't. So feel free to reach out and we can go into a little bit more depth on that one. Maybe the last question here, since I think we're running out of time. If I have pen testers already in my team, is there just an option to use the platform? Today, yes and no. We haven't built out a capability to use it as an internal team to just kind of coordinate your findings and those types of things. Certainly, you can always sign up to the HackerOne platform and test if you want, but that really wouldn't work as part of the testing program because we have to be part of the pen tester community to be included on pen testing programs. But certainly, people sign up for the bounty community all they want, and you can test in public bounties as much as you'd like. There's no limitation to that in particular. But right now, to assign pen testers, they come from our community. All right. I think
With that, we should probably turn it to Naz.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, that was a lot of questions. We tried to cover everything on LinkedIn as well. But as Jared said, if we didn't have the chance to answer your question, we'll definitely be back when we email back. But yeah, thanks everyone for being with us for the last 1 hour. It was super productive and also insightful to see all your questions and interest. We're going to be following up with the recording of this session as well as the ebook we just published, which is pretty much covering the contents of today's session. But if you have any other questions or if there is anything that you want to focus on in terms of the demo or the use cases, yeah, please feel free to reach out to us. We have the link here, but you're gonna get all these links and resources in the email as well. But yeah, thanks everyone. Jared, Spencer, any last words in the last minute?
No, just wanted to thank everybody for their time and spending the last hour with us. And we look forward to discussing further questions.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure.
Thanks again. Bye.